Perfect. So thank you all so much for joining us for the Level Up Your Climate Job Search webinar. My name is Natalie Lavery, and I'm the marketing lead here at Climate People. I'll be moderating the panel and guiding today's conversation. Climate People is a sustainable, equitable, and inclusive climate tech recruitment agency that works with both job seekers and hiring managers with a sole mission of getting more people working on climate. We focus on software, data, product, and user experience recruitment across all climate sectors. We know that getting a climate job or getting any job can be a difficult and confusing process. So we've gathered experts from MCJ Collective, Terra.do, Work on Climate, and of course, Climate People to hopefully answer some of your burning questions. So with that, would you please take 2 seconds to answer this following poll so we can get a gauge of who's here in our audience today? All right, perfect. We can end that, Abby, and you can share the results whenever you have a second. Sweet. So 93% of us are looking for a climate job, 3% are not, and 4% already have one. So kind of what we figured, most people here are looking for a climate job. So our panelists will make sure to tailor their answers to that. To lay the framework for our panel discussion, I want to play a quick video called 5 Steps to Landing Your Next Climate Tech Role. This video is made by the incredible team at SciComm. They're always looking for new ways to collaborate, and Abby will drop a link to their website in the chat while the video is playing or during it, and then we can get that video started whenever she has a second.
Thought about switching to a career in climate tech? Have you submitted job application after job application with no luck landing interviews, let alone your next job offer? Follow Climate People's 5 steps for landing your next climate tech role. The first step is to open your eyes to the possibilities of a climate tech career. We encourage you to recognize both the problem and the possibility. The problem is rooted in the detrimental effects of climate change, but the possibility lies within the wide breadth of opportunity to reverse some of this harm through climate tech innovation. After recognizing the opportunity, you have to dive into researching the industry. Join online communities, listen to podcasts, and subscribe to newsletters. To get you started, check out some of the great resources linked in the description box below. It is essential to be well-versed and knowledgeable about the various sectors and recent advancements. The third step is to update your LinkedIn, resume, and cover letter. Sell your experiences with quantitative impact statements while also showing your unique mission alignment. Many climate tech companies are startups, and the founders are actively involved in the hiring processes. They care about your dedication to tackling climate change. Next, you have to make a name for yourself. Use all of the resources that you have discovered in the research stage and apply them here. Be active and make genuine connections. The climate tech community is very open, but you have to do the legwork. Lastly, it's time to apply for jobs. Solely submitting applications will not land you a job. You have to follow up. Do not disqualify yourself. Even if you are not a perfect fit, still apply for the job. Leverage the connections you have made in step 4 and try to get referrals. Follow these 5 steps and you'll be well on your way to landing a career in climate solutions. Remember, this is not your traditional job search. People in this space want to help, and the more hands we have on deck, the greater impact we can make.
Now as Abby pins our panelists, we can get going. We're going to structure our conversation today into those 5 steps explained in the video just to provide some more context and hopefully give you some actionable insights. Just a quick reminder, please ask all the questions that you have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will reserve a few minutes at the end to answer some of those questions. So with that, I'm thrilled to introduce you to our incredible panelists today. Up first, we have Brendan Anderson, who is the founder and the CEO of Climate People. Ooh, nice timing with turning the camera on. Up next, we have Joshua Stair, who's a freelance service designer and research lead at Work on Climate. We have Leonie Baran, who is the community lead at MCJ Collective. And last but not least, we have Seth Collins, who's the director of learning strategy at Terra.do. I'm going to give them a few seconds to introduce themselves just because they can do a way better job than I can with that. But thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with all of you. So yeah, with that, could you please start off by introducing yourself and the company that you work for? Whoever wants to go first can kick it off.
I'll go first. My name is Brendan Anderson. As Natalie said, I'm the founder of Climate People, and I'm a technical recruiter by trade. I've been a recruiter for 23 years, and I started Climate People because of my deep desire to make an impact on climate change, and felt like using my recruiting skills was the best way that I could do that.
Awesome.
Awesome. Happy to jump in next. I'm Leonie Barron, community lead at MCJ Collective. It was a podcast called My Climate Journey that grew into a community of close to 3,000 people now. And we also invest in climate tech companies, have around 80 companies in our portfolio. My background is consumer goods, corporate sustainability, and a lot of community as well.
Awesome.
I'll go next. I'm Joshua. I'm a designer, also a researcher, systems thinking person. I have been working as the head of research at Work on Climate for since about January. So a lot of the work has been going into what are the challenges for seeking a job in climate, both from job seeker perspective, but also employers and educators, all of that. So yeah, very keen to discuss all of this stuff and help more people get into climate as well.
Definitely.
Pleasure to meet everyone. It's weird because I can't see anyone else except for the other presenters. So I'm just talking to people I see and already know. But my name is Seth. Like Brendan, I'm wearing a t-shirt that has my company's name on it. So we're just doing that, I guess. Didn't plan that at all. Super grateful to be here. I am the director of learning strategy at Terra.do. We are an online climate learning ecosystem that helps folks and accelerates folks along their transition towards working on climate change. So some of those things you heard around, like doing your research, discovering the possibility network, are like learning programs. Our core one is like a 3-month boot camp that really helps you do all of those things. And so we've been alongside about, at this point, 2,000 folks who've made the transition that it looks like a lot of y'all are interested in making and committed to making. And so, yeah, have seen a lot of those journeys, have been a very on the ground guide for a lot of those journeys as well. And just super grateful to be here, super excited to see the size of this community as well. And yeah, my background has been in some way, shape, or form working on climate change since I graduated from undergrad. Global climate finance, politics, startups, kind of all little parts of it.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you all so much for being here. We really couldn't have asked for a better panel of truly the leading experts in this space. So to start, we're going to start really broad. And obviously this panel is about leveling up your climate job search. And all of you are in climate jobs. So you've experienced the very thing that most of our attendees are going through, 93% of them are. So could you please tell us one nugget of job searching advice that helped you get to where you are today? Whoever can kick it off. We don't have to go on a round robin.
I can go first. So I kind of started my climate job seeking journeys probably around September last year. And I just started off by really immersing myself in the space, learning as much as possible. And as I was learning, some of the things that I do is always just try and write up what I'm learning, I enable to sort of teach other people or summarize what I've been learning. And then in that process, I had a few people that were just sort of encouraging me to share what I'd learned. And so most of that was, just to help me solidify what I'd picked up, because there's so many things that I'm learning in this space. It's pretty broad, but as a result of that, sharing it on LinkedIn, on Twitter, all of these kind of places in communities, that just made me way more visible. So by the time I was actually ready to apply for jobs or seek out contracts in climate, then people already knew what I was doing, had an idea of my thought process, and also was a really good way of building up community as well, because people were engaging with a lot of stuff I was writing. So yeah, just making yourself as visible as possible. And I guess one additional thing is I often didn't really know what I was talking about. a lot of the time, and I was pretty honest about that. So a lot of my posts are actually like asking the community about what they know on a specific subject, and then that usually gets a lot of like engagement going. Like the last one actually before this event was asking LinkedIn what their most effective strategies were for getting jobs in climate as well. So yeah, that would be my advice, making yourself visible.
Joshua, can I ask you a follow-up question to that? Because what you just described there is a journey and a story that I've seen a lot of other people go through as well. And one of the points I was going to make, but you lived that experience. Were you working in another job while you were doing this? Or were you fortunate enough to be focusing on this full time, this journey of discovery and learning and sharing?
The latter. I definitely was very lucky to sort of have leave my job in September and like have enough time to really immerse myself in the space. Like I did try to start making the first steps while I still had a job, but it was quite difficult actually at the time. And so yeah, I kind of dedicate myself after I finished my job there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think what we can potentially talk about today too, I'm sure there are some folks here that are in a position where they can dedicate that kind of time, and those that maybe aren't able to, how can we help those folks achieve the same outcome and go through that same process while trying to balance?
Yeah, I definitely have a few resources for like quicker paced learning, things you can do alongside
yeah,
the job as well as sort of the other stuff.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great.
I think also following on from Joshua's point as well, I think being really open about kind of learning in public, whether it is super in public, whether you want to share that work, but also just that you are on a learning process. Because one thing I think I didn't realize when I was like, okay, I really want to find my next role in climate. So it morphed into part of my role at the time. And I was like, I want to go 100% all in, is I thought everyone knew so much about the kind of science behind it. And everyone was kind of mini climate scientists, and that's very much not the case. And I actually had a previous boss of mine tell me that if I was the person in the room that kind of did know the most about climate science, then for my own good, I was probably in the wrong room as well, considering I do not have a science background. So kind of being okay with imposter syndrome, essentially, because I think in some way or another, everyone feels it at some point. And I really mean everyone feels it at some point. And kind of leaning into that, if you can, like use that card, like ask all the questions, say like, I really don't know anything about this area. Can you tell me this? Or I have questions about X, Y, Z. Is more a superpower than I think people realize at the time.
Yeah, definitely. Seth, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's fun because I do have a degree in climate science, and also I, even in my company, am not the smartest climate scientist in the room and have my own journey that I go on with that as well. And so you can take that dynamic and put it at any tier and it still applies. And so yeah, it's something that definitely should emerge as permission to be curious and open in your journeys, and to not be it's so easy to have that little person on your shoulder that's you think is smarter than you, saying all the things about why you don't know these things. And it's just okay to be present with that and to like flick that little person off and kind of let it go. One piece of advice, well, this is going to be a bit maybe counterintuitive or maybe intuitive, but we spend so much time, like a job search is like, you're kind of like going hunting, like you're going out and you're finding a job and you're talking to all these people and you're figuring out like this job is this like target thing and you're trying to do all this stuff. And it's like a very, in some ways it's like very masculine. It's like, we're going to go and we're going to hunt and we're going to like get this thing and this is going to be this job and it's going to be awesome. And, one of the things that we spend time with folks on a lot is actually both when they're initially trying to think about their work, what work they want to do, and even when they have a number of options and they're trying to decide between them, is to say like, this is such a huge ecosystem that there's like a perfect fit for what type of work you want to do, the type of person you want to be, the type of environment you want to be in. Like you don't have to go work for some young 26-year-old guy who's a tech founder. You can go work for a bunch of co-founders who are parents and things like that too, and have that set of values, which is not to say one is better or worse, but they're different. And so one of the things that I've actually found very valuable for myself, and I encourage folks to do, is to take, early in this step. It's so easy to start going out and just trying to figure out who you are relative to all these jobs. And it's just really important to understand that first piece of it, like, who am I? What do I want to do? What is the work that matters to me? What am I? And it might not even be a technical thing. Like, I really want to work in carbon removal. It might be like, I want to work in a job where this is my lifestyle. This is the type of people I work on. Like, getting really clear on some of those things saves you so much time down the road when the little like shiny thing that actually is going to be a horrible fit for you and things like that shows up. You don't spend a bunch of time going after it, but you can like discern. And when you're kind of going into your initial interviews, what like shows up for you. I'm sure we'll get much more into other tactical things, but I just kind of wanted to toss that one out there because it's something that is an intervention we often bring into the conversations that we have.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like you all brought up really good points and truly laid the foundation for discovering the possibilities, because I know I had a preconceived notion that was incorrect about what a climate job looked like. And I know most of you did too. And just one of the most important parts of this entire job search process is to figure out what this looks like and what this looks like for you. So I think, yeah, again, you all brought up some really good points there. I think we kind of covered the discover the possibilities section. I feel like we're ready to move into the research phase. And this kind of is the meat of the conversation. How do you research this? How do we put all of these things that we just discussed into practice? So to start, what resources do all of y'all recommend that job seekers utilize? What do you recommend that people get started with?
I think there are so many amazing job resources out there. We could probably list them for days if we wanted to try. But I think kind of starting from like working backwards, if you will, I think this is something that the Terra team really are good at encouraging people to do as well. And that is kind of figuring out, okay, do you have interest areas, and finding the resources to find those interest areas. A personal favorite is Project Drawdown, the kind of way that they've sliced up the kind of different sectors of climate work and climate science is really, really useful mental framework to figure out everything that's going on. So kind of working backwards, like figuring out the areas you're passionate about. Is it food waste, for example? Is that where your passions overlap with where you think you could kind of lend a hand? And then finding companies that you really admire in those areas. You could find them via podcasts, LinkedIn, books, whatever those resources are, and then like tracking and basically following them and waiting for jobs to come out. LinkedIn alerts, signing up to their newsletters, mailing lists, following their recruitment leads on LinkedIn, even reaching out presumptuously if there isn't a role open as well. But really kind of like creating this like pyramid whereby you're not then overwhelmed by being like, oh my God, I'm on a job board and there are 700 jobs here and I have to filter through them all. And that's just on like area that you might be interested in. That's not even advice for like roles that you could translate your skills into. But yeah, seeing it as a pyramid.
For me, like when I've been researching, like interviewing job seekers, there seems to be two different sort of approaches that come up. So the sort of explorer type and the experimenter type. So the explorer is like really just seeing the landscape, like really just going in different places, like finding out like what's available and like taking their time to do their research. Other people sort of experiment and just dive straight in and just like get started, start volunteering, start interviewing like straight away. And I think there's like, validity in both approaches, and you can kind of mix it up. Like when I started job seeking, I did a bunch of interviews with like zero intention of taking any of those jobs, but as a way to learn and see kind of what things were interesting. And that was kind of my more experimental mindset. And then the explorer was just like really getting on every podcast, getting all of the newsletters. Like there was definitely a few easy ways to get started, like a couple of newsletters or short courses I did when I was still in the job was one called Zopeful, which is like an intro to climate science, and it's like 5-minute emails, super accessible, super well written. And then also actually Leonie had a little low carbon business school thing that I did, also an email course format, which I really enjoyed and was a good sort of ramp into the space. And then I started getting more into another plug also for Terra.do. That's where I like really explored, like in the Learning for Action course that they do. That was, for me, like when I went into this course, my intention was I would actually maybe be more confused as a result. Like I'd open up the possibilities as wide as they could go. And that was where I was really not wanting to, like back to what you said, Seth, wanted to really like challenge my my sort of identity a little bit, because like the obvious transition as me as a designer would be to like work for another startup within the climate space. But I kind of started exploring like how could I get involved in economics or policy or all kinds of different spaces. And the Terra.do course like really gives you a good overview of every sort of opportunity. I'll stop there, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. I think obviously there's a few plugs here for Terra.do. I think obviously work on climate. The panelists here, I think those are some of the best resources. The organizations that you represent, they were some of the most foundational resources for me to learn. I also agree with Leonie. I think Project Drawdown is a really great place for people to start. To learn about the opportunities. I think when you get, and we'll obviously be talking about this, but when you get down to the application process and the interview process, one of the things that we know in talking to our customers is that these companies are really looking for people who have a strong alignment on the mission. And so you really want that, you know, your skill set and where your impact will best be served and where you'll be happy. And so it is a journey of discovery, and you do have to do your research. And I know the people who want to jump into those jobs right now, you could spray and pray and throw your resume out all over the place, but not doing the research oftentimes will be that obstacle and hurdle from you to actually get that job. And so you really do want to take a step back. And I think starting with the organizations here and Project Drawdown will at least give you the beginning of a map of what that looks like, but it could be a long journey. And so earlier we were talking about advice, and the one word advice that I have for people is to be resilient and hang in there. I
think also in terms of like two like buckets of resource as well, there's a site called climatetechcareers.com as well, which does a really good overview of kind of everything in the space without it being overwhelming. That was started by an amazing person called Jack in MCJ. And also a lot of people always ask me how to determine what is like a good startup to join versus, you know, maybe like a less promising one or anything like that. And actually Joshua put together a really good resource about how you should kind of interview the companies that you're being interviewed for as well, and that's a dual thing. But I think one way to find startups who people are backing, and again, it's like it's only really for profit tech companies, so take this with a heavy pinch of salt, because those are not the only jobs out there related to climate, but is VC job boards. So job boards like Breakthrough Energy Ventures, Lower Carbon Capital. We've just released our own one at MCJ Collective as well. And it basically summarizes the companies that VC firms who are doing all the due diligence that you shouldn't have to do, summarizes who they're backing. So that's kind of one way to litmus test as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And another resource that you can use to find those VC firms is Climate Tech VC, the newsletter. They have a great resource where it actually lists the firms that are investing in climate organizations, and you could start by going through all of those firms and then looking at who they invest in.
I don't have much to add to this. I think these are all very, very wise and sage insights from the other folks here. I'm throwing in the chat that hopefully y'all can share. One of our fellows who actually ended up building our Climate Change for VCs program was one of our early fellows, and her name is Susan Sue. She works at Toba Capital now. Was another investor you could also look at who I think makes very discerning investments in climate. but she put together a really, really thorough Medium piece, which is actually a reflection of what exactly Josh was talking about around. She went on this journey and she was sharing about the journey as she was going on it, because she realized maybe it's both going to help me get better at it, but also probably help other folks as well. So I'll throw that out there. And I think the last thing that I'll just throw in is that one of the things that we do at Terra is we run live job fairs we're getting pretty close to a weekly basis now. And so if you want to get to understand who these companies are, not just from some link online or how they sort of present themselves on a website, but actually want to hear them speak about what are we doing, why do we think this is important, what's our mission, to build off what Brendan was saying earlier about, hey, like mission is super, super important to these companies, especially some of their more early hires. And there's that alignment really does matter, or at least for them to hear that you understand it and understand its purpose and why it's important, and feel a connection to that. And I think that's important both for your effectiveness as an employee, but also a lot of this work, the whole journey of transitioning to work on climate is in so many ways. I mean, maybe for some folks, they're seeing a lot of money coming into this and seeing this as an opportunity. But for the vast majority of people that work in this space, we started working in this space because we had a realization that this is a really important thing to do and it really matters. And so everyone that you're talking to who's hiring at these organizations started those organizations from that mindset of, I really care about this. I want to help be a guardian of our planet at this time when we are all finally realizing that the way that we understood how our whole systems work, well, actually probably some indigenous folks knew it all along, but now we have the actual data to measure and tell us that as a larger population, that this is something we really need to orient to. And so you've got so many folks that are running these organizations that are doing it from that reason. And so it's super important to connect with that and to connect to that, both for yourself and within yourself, but also to then, when you speak it honestly, we hear it. And that's what differentiates you from the 10 other people who have a similar skill set to you that's coming into this space. And sometimes even more than, oh, I've already worked in the climate space in some way, shape, or form. If you're connected to it, if you understand the mission, if you understand the purpose and why, it matters for a lot of these folks.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about this why point. I don't know how I feel about it, actually. Just in the fact that it took me a really long time to figure out what my sort of why was. And I don't even know if I have one super specific at the moment. But when I first sort of decided to investigate the space of climate, for me, it was just it's an itch. It seems like I've been working in the design field for a while, and it seems like this is a pretty big problem. I would love to see if I can contribute in any way, but my sort of mindset from the beginning was actually it might not be for me. And through the exploration, I might find that actually there's other areas which I still care more about. It turned out that I do care about this issue, but for me as a designer, I found sort of my why is just it's a huge problem. And there's also a huge people problem, all of the climate stuff. It may seem a bit sort of scientific and whatever, but at the core of it is people. And a lot of it is related to lots of social issues. And, just take an example regenerative agriculture. For me, what's really interesting about that is you're providing food security for people. You're improving the well-being of farmers that we rely on so much. You're improving biodiversity. So there's so many things that interest me about that space that are actually people focused as well. And I only really discovered that later on. And yeah, I don't know, when people ask me why do you care about this thing? I'm how can you not? Almost, that's my response nowadays. But I'm curious if anyone has any sort of thoughts around that, what got them into it, or how would they answer that question?
I started like you. I started with an itch, and that itch, it was almost like my itch was ahead of my knowing and discovering. And so I can relate to you. And it took me actually, one of the reasons I work at Terra is it took me going back to do my master's degree to really dive in enough to really discover what that was for me independently. And it's part of the reason why we do such a deep program, is to give the space for folks to do that investigation in a guided way with community. And yeah, I don't think it emerges for different people at different times. And so I think, Josh, I don't think there's a right or wrong to it. More what I'm saying is that it is something that really resonates with hiring managers and with founders of companies, so I'm just speaking from their side.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Because they're all interesting problems. Like all the stuff that people, this is the other side of it, right? That's like there are all these people working, all these companies working on climate solutions. It's like sticky problems in sectors that are needing to be fundamentally reimagined. It's got such a deep innovation element to it. There's all kinds of like that piece of it as well that are really interesting and exciting. And it's like, wow, how are you going to suck carbon out of the air? Like, really, how are you going to do that? And what are you going to do with that? And how are you going to like totally change the shipping industry? And how are you going to totally, every one of these industries is getting this push. Oh, you're a cement company, and all of a sudden you're making cement that's 85%, 90%, has 95% lower emissions than the biggest cement company in the world, who says that they'll only reduce their cement by 30% in their emissions by their like 2040 or something. And it's like, wow, you're trying to like, it's all disruption. It's all disruption. And so there's a really exciting part of that in like the sort of tech startup space. Again, I do want to frame that there's like tons of other jobs that exist here as well. But that piece of it's also interesting and exciting.
I think as well, like even just a subsidiary benefit is that even if you feel like you don't have that kind of like 100% cooling, or you don't feel like you're like ready yet, or haven't explored the space enough yet, but you do have like an itch, or you are keen, you are passionate, like you want to work on this huge problem space, like as Seth said, it's just, the opportunities are just crazy endless. I think also, and I guess that's why I'm working in a community position as well, but the people in this space are just really mission aligned and nice and optimistic and helpful and focused, and opportunistic and really driven. And I think even if it's just because you want to work with people like that, that's a good enough reason. And there's an incredibly high percentage of people who work in climate who are just like that. So even if it's just for that reason alone, I think that's a good enough reason as is.
I'm wondering if we can do another poll. I had just a little idea, because I think there's like two types of people. I want to see what the results would be, if it's possible, which is, do you feel like overwhelmed by the amount of possibilities that there are, or do you feel like there's not any possibilities where you can contribute, sort of like from overwhelmed to underwhelmed? Like, where would you sit? I would be curious about where people fall on that scale, if it's possible.
Unfortunately, we had to do them beforehand, unless Abby, you're seeing a way to do it now, but I don't think so. But we can include that in the follow-up email and just kind of gauge interest after the fact. I think that's a really good point. But maybe that's an opportunity for another webinar. Yeah, all of those are really great points, but concerning time, I do kind of want to move on to a little bit more of the nitty-gritty job search. So like updating your resume and networking. Like I want to give some people some actionable insights and takeaways for things that they can do today, tomorrow, to really kickstart their job search. So with that, I know one of the main questions that we always get is, should I have climate written out in my profile? What are y'all's opinions on that?
Yes. If this is like an area you want to work in, then I think, kind of in line with what Josh said earlier about kind of putting out your learning process and your exploration process out there, I think when it comes to trying to find jobs, like putting out your intentions, and also kind of there's a phrase I love, which is just like increasing your surface area for serendipity, getting involved in projects, speaking about what you're doing, creating things, even if no one reads them, or they're projects that don't go anywhere, that's absolutely fine. Then when it comes to job search and you sit down at a company you're passionate about, you can say, hey, I did this, this, and this, and no one ever told me to, right? But I'm actually really passionate about food waste, and this is an article I wrote 2 months ago, or this is a project I volunteered with for 1 hour a week. So just like increasing that surface area, like putting the word out there, because there are so many opportunities. And what kind of sucks, because it means it can exclude some people who are historically excluded anyway, is that the more opportunities you come across, the more you'll also find. And it's this feedback loop and this network effect. So yeah, like join communities. We have a system in MCJ where anyone who says that they're interested in looking for a job, when they apply, we essentially send them an internal talent form and they'll get put in front of our 80 plus portfolio companies. And we try and facilitate introductions that way. Join things like Climate Draft is a really amazing resource, pulling people into working on amazing climate solutions. But be intentional, like open it up, speak to people, be noisy about it. I think it's fun that way as well.
In addition to like adding what you should add in your like LinkedIn, your cover letters, I think to go beyond like just adding climate, like worth looking at like the job descriptions, the jobs that are out there, what are the keywords that you actually see coming up often, and just like mirror the language. Because if a recruiter or a hiring manager is looking through profiles or searching for things, those are the things they're going to be looking for, and you're going to be showing up in their searches. So like I have more specific things that I have in my profile now. Also, like when I started out, I just started following loads of people that are sort of speaking about this kind of subject a lot. So my content feed is actually, I think I need to like clean it up a little bit now, because if I go to LinkedIn, like I'm overwhelmed with climate stuff, but that's kind of was intentional at first. And so you can start out by just engaging with people and their content, and then most likely they're also going to have a look at your profile, and that's kind of a way for people to also be visible, is that you just start engaging with people's content. And also it gives you an easy way to start like the networking conversations as well, because you've got some shared idea or shared interest that you can already start talking about. Yeah.
I think as well, it's people often feel a lot of pressure and also desire to increase their network and to build their network in this space, especially if you're new to it. You might not have friends that are in it. I didn't at all. And I think that can be tricky to do. That can also be really daunting to do. It can feel strange to reach out to people you've never met before. And that can be really difficult. So I'd say finding ways to be in these spaces anyway, whether it is going to panels and saying thank you to the speakers after, or going to communities and like engaging with people there, or turning up to events in your local area if they don't exist, trying to organize them as well, and just kind of being part of the space. And then going to people as well if someone's working on something that you're really interested in, or for a company that you really admire, and just being really genuine in why you want to talk to them. I think don't build network for the sake of just having more LinkedIn connections, but just being really genuine and thoughtful and intuitive as well with reaching out to people, because everyone's super keen to help if they have bandwidth. Everyone was in that position at some point as well. And I think there's a collective desire to kind of like pull more people through and keep that door open. So do reach out to people, but just kind of know why you're doing it. And if you have, questions specifically about what they've done or what they're involved in, then be directive with that. Because if anything, you'll just be saving their time and your time as well.
Just quickly follow up on that point, because in the research I've been doing, networking is like the thing that everyone says you should do, but also a lot of people struggle with it. And I think like networking in some way sometimes feels a bit like, someone described it as icky in one of the interviews I did. So sometimes some of it's about sort of reframing what it is, and in the end it's like just a conversation. And a lot of times it's another channel to learn. So if you frame the conversation as not like you're trying to get a job, but rather like you're trying to learn, then it takes some of the sort of transactional nature out of it. And sometimes it's good to also look for specific people, like either in the same stage that you're in or the stage where you want to be in. So like if you have sort of role models and then like your questions or your sort of things you're trying to learn from them is like, I want to be where you are now. Like, so tell me a little bit more about your journey and like how you got there and what challenges you had to overcome, and sort of make it more about like learning from them, and of course showcase where you're at so they can give you sort of more useful advice. And the other thing as well I've been thinking about is like the idea of regenerative relationships. So at some point maybe you see it as like you're there to learn from them, but at some point, if it's not now but in the future, they'll be learning from you as well. So like this sort of reciprocal nature of networking as well. Don't just like count yourself out as you're the one always learning. You do have something to offer as well.
Yeah, definitely. So quickly, Brendan, I had a question for you in terms of just being a recruiter and seeing these applications coming in every single day. Is there a specific formula that you recommend people should follow when talking about their climate experiences, either on their resume, their cover letter, or their LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Can I flip this, Brendan, when you're answering
Sure.
this? Just I saw a question in here, and I think it's like much more important from what we see. It's the same thing you're asking, Natalie, but it's like most of these folks don't have climate experience. And so they're trying to, they've got like a little, maybe
Yeah.
y'all have a little bit of climate experience. You've taken a Terra.do course, or you've like, you know, volunteered or something. And then you've got all these skills that you have in your background that is like super skilled. And again, most of these companies are hiring for roles like sales, and you may have a sales background or something like whatever your functional expertise is. And so it's I think really what the question we see a lot is, how do I combine these two things so that I'm telling the right narrative about myself that makes me noticed when I feel like I don't have any expertise in climate and I'm trying to figure out how this particular expertise I have in comms comes over here, or something, or strategy or whatever.
Yeah, so I would, add on to that. I think you're exactly right, Seth. I think from the recruiter perspective, we're not going out specifically trying to search for people that have climate experience. In fact, the argument that I make with our customers when they ask for people who have experience in a competing firm is we try to talk them out of that. And we try to talk about what transferable skills exist in other industries, because collectively, I don't really have an interest in recruiting somebody out of my customer's number one competitor. It just creates another hole someplace else in the climate community. I'd rather pull somebody from another industry. And so what we're looking for are people that have the skills. And for us, we recruit for technology skills. So we're looking for the very specific technology skills that the customers that we recruit for. We will do some keyword searching around climate and some of the keywords that our customers might be potentially interested in. And so I think what we can do is combine a number of the things that we've talked about, right? So, we've talked about, Joshua talked about being able to add things to your LinkedIn profile. Leonie mentioned that as well. Well, I think you first do the research and you figure out what are the things that you're really interested in. Then you can go online and find out who are the companies that are doing that. A lot of these companies, there's lots of company lists out there. Then you look to see what are they looking for in their job descriptions, like Joshua mentioned. I would put that information into a word cloud, right? And figure out what are the keywords that keep coming up. Then you start doing your research. You maybe start doing some writing. You share those writings on LinkedIn. To Leonie's point, if nobody reads it, it doesn't really matter. Your information will start to show up, right? And companies will start to see that. Recruiters will start to see that. Personally, and this is the recruiter in me, I don't really read cover letters all that much. I don't know if the rest of the team here has a strong opinion. I think if you're applying directly to a company and you're sending it to the founder, I think you do want to have a strong cover letter to speak to the mission and why you think that's really important, and what skill or volunteer experience that you might have that would be appropriate. But as a recruiter, we very rarely read cover letters. We're really looking at that core responsibility and skill set relevant to what our customer is looking for and what they're paying us to find, right? Is to find that skill set that they don't have on their team right now. I hope that helps.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. So I know we're going to move into the Q&A in a few minutes, but I have seen a recurring theme in the Q&A right now is a lot of people are touching on years of experience and how it's a lot easier to translate these skills if you have 10 years of product management experience or whatever it may be. What advice do you have for people who are just graduating grad school or internships or anything along those lines for getting a job in this space?
If I could jump in, because I have a real passion point for helping early career folk to jump into climate as well. I think it can be hard because you feel like you haven't really proven yourself yet in any role. And suddenly you're looking at what feels like perhaps a highly technical or highly scientific space, and then going, oh my God, I need so much more. And so I think key tips would be find others in a similar kind of position or at a point with you, build that kind of like, build your smaller community, find people you can support and who can support you. And then just like, same with what we've said, go with an open mind, be really intentional, ask to help. Anything you see that you find interesting, just be like, if you ever need help, like, let me know. I think especially if you haven't graduated yet and you maybe have a little bit of time or a little bit of capacity to help out with things, like get involved. You will not be expected to show that you have loads of experience or can deliver X, Y, and Z crazy, revenue increase at this point. So don't feel like you have to show it, but just show your enthusiasm and find others in a similar position to you.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. So quickly before we move into the Q&A, if all of you could give a 2-sentence, less than 30-second piece of advice, one takeaway from this conversation, what would it be? Seth, you got it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is like, congratulations. I mean, it's really, it can be a very lonely experience doing a job transition, like as someone who's had to do that once. And I've always laughed at myself looking back at one point in my life. I probably did like the worst job search anyone could ever do at one point. And some of the questions I've seen in the Q&A, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when I was figuring out all those things. Like it can be really hard. And like, first of all, you're not alone. Find a community. And I think all three of us, outside of climate people, are all folks who are like, we're parts of organizations that are designed to be communities for exactly this point. Like there's a lot of people out there, and maybe they're not the people that you're having dinner with right now and things like that, but they're out there. And so there's a lot of folks that want to support you and be part of that. And then the congratulations piece of it, simply like, we're still early in all of this. Like really, we are. Even if you're just thinking about the US, you look about the amount of money that went into the the small Green New Deal, calling it the IRA is always weird. Like I saw some question about it, how are these startups going to be impacted? And at the end of the day, like this sector is growing. Like we've left the station with electric vehicles, we've left the station with renewable energy. All these other things are gearing up to just go onto those same tracks, and the inertia is really like there. And so, and this is something we say to all of our fellows when they graduate, is like, it's really special to be a person who's like had this realization that this is an important thing to work on, and you're still ahead of the curve in a lot in this space in general. And in 15-20 years, it's going to feel really cool to yourself, to potentially your kids, to your family, that you were like in this work at this point. I mean, even me looking back 10 years that I've been in climate, and it's like wild how different it is, and the communities, the number of people is involved in it, all of these things. And so, also I would just say, like, keep it up. I know it requires resilience, but we're talking about building a resilient planet. Like, you're learning to embody some of these things on the journey, and there's a community here that wants to support you. And I really want to, I know I'm saying 3 things instead of 1, but I really want to put a huge stamp on the giving nature of this community. Like, and maybe someone doesn't respond right away when you ask them or something like that. So I can't say like it's perfect, but in general, everyone we see kind of coming through and who show up with this really honest, like, I want to work on this stuff. Everybody wants to help you succeed. And that might be different than maybe some other industries or other parts of this world that we're all navigating, but like this is a space where that is generally the theme. So if you keep going, people want to help you and they want to support you. So yeah, those are my three things that you can distill into one thing.
I think that was brilliantly put. I don't have much to add apart from, with due respect to everyone here, I'd say take all advice with a pinch of salt, because it's so much easier to kind of like connect the dots looking backwards. I used to see people who were doing such cool roles on LinkedIn and then like stalk their profile and be like, okay, so if I go and study that and then I go here and do this, then I'll end up in a role like that. That must be the path, but that's just kind of not the case. It's so individual. So figure out what works for you and stick with it.
Yeah, I agree. Circling back on Seth's point, I did see that question in the chat about will the recession impact this space? And I would say I agree with Seth. I really don't think it will. I was doing some research before this event, and in between 2008 and 2009, during the last, during that financial crisis and the recession then, there were some companies that grew out of that you might know of, like Instagram and Pinterest and WhatsApp and Venmo and Airbnb, Uber, Netflix changed their business model, Amazon had this growth flywheel effect between 2008 and 2009, Square, Asana, Slack, there were more. To Seth's point, we are just at the beginning of this, and there are early stage startups. There are companies that will launch later this year and next year that everyone's going to know about in 10 years, right? And so if you're struggling to find that job now, keep at it. But also look, certainly if you're employed too, I would recommend looking at Drawdown Labs. How can you take your current job and turn that into a climate job? If you're in sales or marketing or accounting or whatever your field is, do you have the opportunity internally to impact and affect change? And you can help make an impact in your current organization by taking your current job and making that more sustainable and making that more climate friendly, whilst also then doing the research. And it's a lot of work and it'll take some time, but this sector is only going to continue to grow and you will eventually find your way here. So.
Tons of amazing advice. I don't know how I'm going to attempt to add something new to this, although all of you have already said some amazing things. I would say the job search is long, and it doesn't actually really stop. So I would focus on just like the learning aspect as well and the reflection aspect. So there will be, as Seth has talked about with needing resilience, there will be like rejections along the way, and like your mindset is like one of the most important things to kind of get through it. Of course, the community as well that can support you through this, but think sort of trying to get as much feedback as you can, trying to experiment with different approaches, trying to learn from like what worked, what didn't, like throughout this thing. But also like for many people, it's like a time where they're reflecting on their career like more actively than they've ever done before. So like take the time to actually like journal and write things that are motivating you and which things you're not motivated by, and like there's an ongoing journey. All of us have like been a part of the way on that journey, but it's still going for us as well. So yeah, I think just seeing each sort of hurdle or each sort of opportunity that comes as a learning experience. And I think that's when I've seen the most sort of resilient job seekers have that sort of growth mindset and have that learning mindset throughout it as well.
Yeah, definitely. That was all great little nuggets of advice there, and I think provides a lot of value. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time for Q&A now, but don't worry, I will save all of these questions and then we will get together as a group and send a follow-up email with all of the resources listed and then answers to all these questions too. So they will not go unanswered, but we do have time for maybe one or two So the first one that we have is from Sarah Jacobson, and it says, can we hear your thoughts on more specific tactics in landing a job after the interview process? A lot of jobs I've interviewed for have junk drawer job descriptions and are asking for everything, i.e. a unicorn candidate. No one is like that. Yet this is the reaction I'm getting from small and large companies in interviews. So basically, what is your advice for companies that are kind of asking for that unrealistic unicorn candidate, and how do you navigate that? Anyone can.
Brandon might be more placed to answer this than me, but I think job descriptions are often written like wish lists and should also be seen as such. And also, I think, I forget the exact stats, but it often means that especially like female identifying folk don't apply for jobs where they don't meet 100% of the requirements that are listed. Apply anyway, because I can tell you that the person who put out that job description probably knows that they're not going to get 100% of that role. So apply anyway.
Yeah, Leonie, I totally agree with you. I think in the context of, if you're interviewing, Sarah, I think a potential interviewing technique that you could use is, as best as you can in the interview, you try to get the interviewer to talk about the role and the responsibilities and what's most important. And so it is a skill that you can develop over time. If you've gotten that interview direct through an application, or maybe you had a referral into that organization, if there's any inside information, maybe early in the interview, if you can ask the interviewer, hey, I've done the research on your organization, I'm really excited, I've read this job description, can you tell me what's most important to you about this job and what you're looking for? To Leonie's point, it's actually one of the biggest challenges that I feel like our customers have is these jobs, particularly for startups, right? They write a job description and they're looking for the world. That's often not what they end up hiring for, but it is not what they should be doing. And we work with our customers on that to try to really narrow these job descriptions down. But as an interviewer, a tactic and a technique you could use is in the interview, asking, before you tell them all about your background, is ask them, what are they looking for in this role? And then you can make mental notes as you're talking to them. Okay, how do I want to talk about my experience relevant to what they've just described? So you're really hitting as best you can and in that interview. I would say as a follow-up to that, obviously I am a big fan of people sending thank you notes after the interview, and making sure that you're addressing why you think your skills are a good fit for the job, why you're excited about that opportunity. And I'd say, even backing up, at the end of the interview, if you have the opportunity to ask that, let them know that tell them that you're excited about the opportunity. Ask them if they have any feedback. Are there any gaps in my background? Are there things that I haven't addressed? Because I'm really excited about this job. Are there things that I haven't addressed about my background? I'd like to do that while I have the opportunity. And then address it. Hopefully they give you that feedback. And then afterwards, you follow up with a really well-written thank you note, specifically addressing why you think you're a good fit, why you're excited about the opportunity, and asking for next steps. So those are just a couple tidbits that I think potentially are helpful.
It may sound like super silly, but it's like 100% all of those things. Like, we hire and we've got tons of folks that are applying for jobs all the time. And at the end of the day, we get tons of really amazing candidates. And like, how do we differentiate? A lot of times it's just little things like this that helps us. Just, you're demonstrating care. And I always say this to people. I'm like, until I tell you to not message me again, trust me that I've forgotten more than you're a bad person or you've done something wrong or I don't like you. It's like, that's most likely what's happened here. I'll own that, but just ask me again. Like, when I want you to stop, trust me that I'll tell you to stop. And that's okay. You're not being annoying or any of those things. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Just one quick sort of addition, a format I like to use. So instead of cover letters, there's a format called like a pain letter, which basically you form a hypothesis about what the pain the company is going through or the specific role, what they're trying to solve, and then construct this like dragon slaying story where like you showcase some experience that you've had in some other job where you've actually done a similar thing, or something similar that will help you actually solve that pain, and you can sort of carry this forward into the interview. Because a lot of times people list like skills they think they need, but actually don't really help them like solve the challenge that they're trying to do. And a lot of employers just, you know, the starting point for putting together job description is literally finding something similar, copying it, pasting, changing a couple of things. So you know, focus on like what Brendan said, like what is it they actually need, and how can you help them sort of address that need, and sort of follow that through the interview process. Think about the sort of keywords you want to highlight, the messaging points you want to say.
Definitely. Awesome. So unfortunately, we are all out of time. I know we could continue this conversation for probably 3 more hours, but just wanted to say thank you all so much for attending. We truly couldn't do this work without all of you. And as cliche as it sounds, we truly do need all hands on deck in this fight against climate change. So again, thank you. And then Brendan, Leonie, Seth, and Joshua, thank you for not only your time today, but all the incredible work you and your organizations are doing on all of these causes. And then also, last but not least, a major shout out to Abby. She's been running the back end of this entire webinar and has made it very seamless for all of us. So thank you all around to everyone. So yeah, we're going to wrap things up, but I will make sure to follow up to this webinar with a link to more information on all of our organizations, a long comprehensive list of all of the resources we mentioned, and then of course, answers to all of the unanswered Q&As. Thank you so much for asking all of those.
Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah. All righty. Happy Tuesday, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.